Stories in the Bible don't begin with once upon a time or even long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, because what we are reading in the Bible are historical accounts of things that God did in our lives and in the lives of real people. When you have unnamed people in the story, and that is frequent in the Bible, we're not always told the names of the people that are involved, like in today's passage that we'll be looking at. They were still real people who lived in a real place and had a real encounter with the living God. So today we will see in the ministry of the prophet Elisha, he's going to minister to an unnamed family in the town of Shunammite. Now, there is a contrast here that we might notice from last week. Sometimes we focus on each story individually, but sometimes it's good to get a view of the stories put together. See, last week in the same chapter, Elisha ministered to a poor woman whose husband had died and who had 2 sons. In the very next story, which is what we will look at today, Elisha will minister to a prominent, probably wealthy woman who has an older husband but no children. Why does that matter? Well, because no matter your status in life, rich or poor, young or old, married or single, if you have children or if you don't, you are important to God. And God can do work in your life. No matter your status, if you'll come to the Lord, He can do some work for you and in your life. And so let's continue in 2 Kings chapter 4, picking up in verse 8. One day Elisha went to Shunammite. A prominent woman who lived there persuaded him to eat some food. So whenever he passed by, he stopped there to eat. Then she said to her husband, "I know that the one who often passes by here is a holy man of God. So let us make a small, walled-in upper room and put a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp for him there. Whenever he comes, he can stay there." So Elisha, in this story, it starts off, he gets a dinner invitation from a prominent woman who lives in the town of Shunammite. And every time after that he would pass through, he would stop in for dinner. And what that tells me is the Shunammite woman probably was a good cook, because he kept coming back. I mean, okay, at least that's my thinking. Or at least she's a better cook than the sons of the prophets, because actually in the very next story we'll look at in chapter 4 next week, Elisha has to heal their food. Okay, so nobody gets sick. So I feel it's clear why he preferred the Shunammite woman's cooking over the cooking of the sons of the prophets. Okay, so we'll look more at that next week. Now, throughout this story, we're never told the name of the woman or her husband or her son. And that's fairly typical in biblical stories. They usually tell the name of the major players like Elisha, the people who are doing the ministry, who God is working through. But they rarely reveal the identity of the person receiving the miracle. That's actually kind of rare. There's a few stories where it happens, but most of the time it does not. And, maybe God followed some kind of ancient HIPAA laws. He didn't reveal, the identity of the people receiving the miracle. Now, the truth is that in the most biblical narratives, the recipients of the miracle are anonymous. And maybe that's because God can do this miracle. He can do miraculous things in the life of anyone. The name of the person is not really what's important. What's important is that God's doing the miracle. He's the one intervening in this person's life. And so the name of the person receiving the miracle isn't the point of the story. Nonetheless, there are several things we do know. There was a prominent woman who lived in Shunammite. She believed in the Lord and that Elisha was a true prophet of God. She believed in him. Now, this is in a time where most people in Israel would have been, or many people in Israel would have been worshiping Baal or falsely worshiping the golden calves that had been set up back in the day of Jeroboam. So this woman was a worshiper of the Lord. And she suggested to her husband they should provide for Elisha, not just a meal when he passes by, but a place to stay when he's in town. Elisha, like the prophets before him, like the judges before him, seems to have traveled through Israel almost on a circuit. The judges would do this, the prophets would do this, so they could minister to the people without them having to come all the way to one central location. He would tour the country, and this way he would be able to minister to more people as he passed through at different times. Now, I don't know this with the prophets. I do know it with the kings. But it may be true for the prophets as well. You tend to head north in the summer and south in the winter. Okay, there is that kind of a dynamic, and so they didn't have air conditioning, and so it made sense. If you could, you did. This generous family in Shunem provided so that Elisha, when he was passing through their region, he would have a regular place to stay, a real room with furniture. Now that's actually very upscale in their day. A lot of people had a place to sleep, but to actually have a table and chair to sit in, a lamp, a place to read, that was kind of rare for the common person. So he's not just camping somewhere when he's in Shunem, he has a place to stay. Now, it was most likely a small room on a second story of a house. They actually did a lot of second story, sleeping arrangements, because you could get up in the house and they'd have kind of an open area where the breeze would come through in the night and cool you down. They didn't have air conditioning. It was almost certainly would have had a staircase that led up to the room. That was very common for their buildings. And so Elisha could come and go without having to go through their house. I mean, it's almost like giving him his own little apartment. And it seems odd to us maybe, but homes in their day did often have this sleeping arrangement on the roof. And here in Phoenix, I don't know about you, I don't know too many people who sleep on the roof here. That doesn't work for us. No, I'm staying inside where the air conditioning is. That's what I'm doing. But the story really begins with a person recognizing the Lord and trying to honor him by supporting the ministry of his prophet. That's where we pick up. This woman from Shunem is trying to support the ministry of the Lord. And I think you will see that her generosity and faithfulness pays off. You cannot outgive God. And so this woman is going to be our example. Now, ancient Shunem is now the site of the modern Arab village of Salem. It is still inhabited to this day. If you were to visit, they have a spot where they would tell you the Shunammite woman's house is, and I have a picture of that for us today. This is the wall. If you went on a tour in the Holy Land, the tour guide would tell you this is where the house stood. Now, I don't know if that's true. I just know that's what the tour guide will tell you. But they do have a wall and a plaque, and looks to me like a place for donations. They have all that set up there in the village of Salem. The Bible doesn't give us the exact geocaching coordinates of the Shunammite woman's house. That would be nice. All we know from Scripture is that it was in the ancient town of Shunem, but it could have been where this wall stands. And I do also have a map of where Shunem would have been. You can kind of see the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River coming down. It would be there in that region, kind of that northern Israel, right at the edge of the Jezreel Valley. It's a very fertile region. They're right at the base of a hill in this very fertile region of the Jezreel Valley, about 15 miles southwest of the Sea of Galilee. And I do have a view of the hill. This is if you were standing in the Jezreel Valley looking at that hill, there behind the Sea of Galilee would be about 15 miles, just keep going. That would be the area that they have, very lush, green, good for farming. And this is actually a very famous site. It's one of the spots Gideon passed through. It's also right across from where Saul died. This is where the Philistines camped when they fought Saul on the opposite hill, and he died at Gilboa. And then finally, I have a view. If you were standing on the hill looking down at the town, it's a pretty steep hill. If you're looking down at the town, that's about where the town of Shunem would have been. And so just, it's a real place. You could actually go there and visit if you want to. Don't know if you want to go to the Holy Land right this minute, but time that visit when it's not quite so turbulent, but it is there. So Shunem was a town allotted to the tribe of Issachar. So while we're never told the identity of the family, the fact that they owned land there would very likely make it so that they're of the tribe of Issachar. But regardless, they were faithful to support God's ministry through Elisha. And let's continue with that story. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 11. One day he came there and stopped at the upstairs room to lie down. He ordered his attendant, Gehazi, call the Shunammite woman. So he called her, and she stood before him. Then he said to Gehazi, say to her, look, you've gone to all this trouble for us. What can we do for you? Can we speak to you on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army? She answered, I am living among my own people. So he asked, then what should be done for her? Gehazi answered, well, she has no son, and her husband is old. Call her, Elisha said. So Gehazi called her, and she stood in the doorway. Elisha said, at this time next year, you will have a son in your arms. Then she said, no, my lord, man of God, do not lie to your servant. The woman conceived and gave birth to a son at the same time the following year, as Elisha had promised her. And so in this story, the Shunammite woman provides for and blesses Elisha, God's prophet. So Elisha wants God to bless her in return. You know, she's done a lot for us. What can we do for her? What can we do to be a blessing to her in return for her kindness? How can we do that? What does she need? What can we give her? And so Elisha offers to speak to the king or to the commander of the army on her behalf. Is there anything she needs? Some injustice that has been done that needs righted? Elisha was a prominent and powerful character in ancient Israel, so he could walk into the throne room and talk to the king. He could walk into the army headquarters and talk to the commander of the army. He had that authority. But the woman doesn't need that. She's at home with her own people. She really doesn't have any grievances. She's wealthy, she's secure, living well. And so really, basically, she says she doesn't need any of that. Thank you, Mr. Elisha, appreciate it, but don't need it. Her giving to Elisha does not seem to be based on wanting him to do something. I mean, here's her chance. If she wanted something out of Elisha, this is her chance. She could go to him and say, hey, this is what I want. She doesn't ask for anything. And we should understand you can't outgive God. Because God always sees and he always rewards true faithfulness. He knows what we need, even if we don't ask it. And so you want to be a person, if you want to be a person that God blesses, make sure you use what you have to bless others. It's a good rule of thumb. Make sure you use what you have to bless others. God tends to pour his blessings into open hands, not closed ones. So Elisha was not satisfied with the woman's answer. She didn't need anything. Well, so he starts a brainstorming session with his servant Gehazi. And Gehazi points out the woman has no son and her husband is old. Now that was kind of a common thing in the ancient world. Usually men married women that were, younger than they were. Actually, it may not be so different. In the modern world, probably the age difference is less in the modern world. The generous woman was there to take care of her husband in his old age. I mean, her husband's old now. She's taking care of him. Not that he isn't able to work, but he's older. But who's going to take care of her in her old age? Now remember, we kind of saw this dynamic last week. They did not have Social Security back in the day. In their day, the way you provided for your retirement years was to have children. And your children would take care of you when you got too old to work. You cared for them when they were young. They care for you when you're old. That was the dynamic. And so Gehazi is pointing out, the one thing I see that she needs is a son. In her culture, that's very important. Who's going to take care of her when her husband passes away? Who's going to inherit the land and carry on the family name? And so there's this dynamic. And so Elisha calls her back and promises her that a year from that day, she would be holding a son. Now, she tells him not to lie to her. That's probably a bad thing to accuse a prophet of. But she says, don't lie to her. It wasn't that she always wanted it, but it's probably too much than she can hope for. But Elisha promises it, and the Lord causes it to happen. 1 year later, she has a baby boy. And so the Shunammite woman had taken action to bless Elisha, to support God's ministry through him, and so God in return blessed her, blessed her family by giving her the one thing she really needed. He knows what we need, even if we don't ask. So be faithful and trust God to be faithful in return. Now, right here is a really good spot to end this story. We can end on a happy ending, right? You know, they lived happily ever after. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Life doesn't work that way. Not really. Just as the Bible does not begin with once upon a time, the stories in the Bible do not end with they lived happily ever after. Okay? We live in a real fallen world, and it has real problems. And so let's continue. The story continues in verse 18. The child grew and one day went out with his father and the harvesters. Suddenly he complained to his father, "My head, my head." His father told his servant, "Carry him to his mother." So he picked him up and took him to his mother. The child sat on her lap until noon and then died. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut him in, and left. She summoned her husband and said, "Please send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys so I can hurry to the man of God and come back again." But he said, "Why go to him today? It is not a new moon or a Sabbath." She replied, "It's all right." Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Go fast. Don't slow the pace for me unless I tell you." So she came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her at the distance, he said to his attendant Gehazi, "Look, there's the Shunammite woman. Run out and meet her and ask, 'Are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your son all right?' She answered, 'It is all right.' When she came up to the man of God at the mountain, she clung to his feet. Gehazi came to push her away, but the man of God said, 'Leave her alone. She is in severe anguish, and the Lord has hidden it from me. He hasn't told me.' Then she said, 'Did I ask my Lord for a son? Didn't I say, don't lie to me?' So Elisha said to Gehazi, 'Tuck your mantle under your belt. Take my staff with you and go. If you meet anyone, don't stop to greet him. If any man greets you, don't answer him. Then place my staff on the boy's face.' The boy's mother said to Elisha, 'As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you.' So he got up and followed her. Gehazi went ahead of them and placed the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or sign of life. So he went back to meet Elisha and told him, the boy didn't wake up." Blessing in this story had turned to tragedy. This woman, it seemed that the gift of God had given her, the blessing God had given her, has now been ripped away. It's lost forever. And the woman who had all she needed except for this son now is responding to God's faithfulness. God provided her the one thing she was lacking, the son she needed to carry on the family name and take care of her old age, and now he's suddenly gone without explanation. He's died. What we need to notice, I think, is her reaction. When things went tragically wrong, the woman went to the man of God as fast as she could get there. She called him on the promise. She told him, did I ask for a son? Didn't I say, don't lie to me about giving me a son? And I think in this, I really believe she's going to Elisha because she wants her son back. She wants the miracle. She wants restoration. She wants what God had promised and what seems to have been ripped away, that future security, the son she loved. All of the blessings that God gives us are temporary. We brought nothing into this world, and we will take nothing out of it. God may bless us with many family, friends, children, and grandchildren, but someday they will all die. The death rate is 100%. I said that to the nurse at my doctor's office once, and she about fell out of the chair. It just seemed like, I think they would teach that in med school, death rate's 100%. But that is the reality we face. However, in this case, what is at stake is God's provision for this woman's future security. Just like it was for the poor widow we looked at last week. If her son died now, who would take care of her in old age? God had provided, but now that provision seems to be ripped away. Was God's blessing a lie? God's reputation is at stake. The woman's reaction was to run to the one place she could get help, the source of her blessing. She honors, she obeys, and she pursues God for help. Now, I think you might see a pattern forming here, because she immediately goes to Elisha, God's prophet, in spite of life's hardships and loss. The pattern that we see in these ministries of Elisha is that the people who run to God for help are the people who find help. Okay, if you run away from God, don't expect God's help. But if you want God's help, run to Him. She went all the way from where she was to Elisha, all the way to Elisha, who was on Mount Carmel. And I have a map of that here. That's all the way across the Jezreel Valley. She would have been, it's probably, as the crow flies, right about 19 miles from Shunammite to Mount Carmel. Now, it's hard to go as the crow flies. Usually roads, kind of wind, so it's hard to know exactly how long the trip would have been for. It's estimated, now this is estimated, that a walking donkey would take about 7 to 8 hours to make that trip, a donkey. That if you were walking, a person walking is probably looking at about 10 hours. A running distance could range anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, depending on your physical condition. And so I think most of us would be taking the donkey. Just say, poor donkey for me, right? That's the thing. Now, God had not told, but she makes the trip. It doesn't matter how long it was. She goes as fast as she could. God had not told Elisha what was coming, but he immediately knew something's wrong. Why is she coming today? What's going out? He quickly figures it out. The boy has died. And so he sends Gehazi right away. He sends him with his staff in an attempt to revive the boy. Now, Elisha's instructions to Gehazi was tuck your mantle up in your belt. Now, back then they wore robes. The men wore robes, and they would be long. And so you see Elijah doing this when he's going to run. But they would actually tuck it up and tuck it into their belts so their legs would be free for running. Okay, it's kind of hard. Ladies would understand this better than men. It's hard to run in a dress. Is that fair? Is that fair? Okay. So he's having to do this so he can run better and not have the long robe or mantles or capes or whatever tangling his legs as he goes. He told Gehazi not to greet or to even speak with anyone. His mission was to get to the boy as fast as possible. You're going to go straight there. You're not going to be distracted by anything or by anyone. You're going to go as fast as you can, and you're going to put my staff on the boy's face. Elisha's staff would have been a symbol of Elisha himself. Possibly God's miraculous power working through him. At least we see that, is the way it worked with Moses. His staff was the representative of God's power, or even with Aaron, his staff, a couple others in the Bible. We don't tend to think about it because we're in a world of mass production. But in their world, each staff was unique. It was different. It was individual. Each article of clothing was unique. They didn't have Walmart, okay? You didn't just go buy off the rack. Everything was custom made. And nothing was mass produced. And so the staff would be unique and would symbolize its owner. In fact, most staffs in their day had a completely unique either bottom handle or top piece that had been carved so that it would make the symbol of that person when they rolled it on clay. It was like their stamp. Their staff became their stamp. It represented them. And so pressing it into clay would be the legal equivalent of signing their name. And an ancient ruler in that time, or even a merchant, could, if he couldn't make it to a meeting, but there was something important that he needed to attend, he could send a representative with his staff. And they would be authorized by holding that staff. It was like having their corporate ID badge. They could get in, and they were authorized to speak on their behalf. They had full administrative privileges and basically signed power of attorney. And so if you had that staff, the law in their day would have treated you exactly as the owner of the staff. And so Gehazi is sent with this staff. He's sent representing Elisha because he can get there quicker in the hopes that God will resurrect this boy. His job was to get there as quickly as he could. And so Elisha and the woman and her servant follow on behind. Now, I'm sure they're going as quickly as they can, but Gehazi's probably younger. Okay, he's Elisha's young attendant, and so he can probably run faster. Usually the older you get, the slower you run. That's, I can't even run to the refrigerator as fast as I used to. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's hard when you get old. But it was an emergency, and so Gehazi was sent on ahead, and the woman and her servant and Elisha come on, I'm sure as fast as they could, but they go on behind. And he wants to see if Gehazi can do it. He's not hindered by having to bring a donkey or other, that sort of thing. Gehazi does run ahead. He places the staff on the boy, but it has no effect. As far as he can tell, the boy doesn't wake up. He doesn't open his eyes. Doesn't seem to make any difference. The boy is still dead. And so he returns to tell Elisha. As Elisha's heading to Shunem, Gehazi meets him on the way. And he's making his way there. So let's continue with Elisha's arrival. Verse 32. When Elisha got to the house, he discovered the boy lying dead on his bed. So he went in, closed the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. Then he went up and lay on the boy. He put his mouth to mouth, eye to eye, hand to hand. While he went down over him, the boy's flesh became warm. Elisha got up and went into the house and paced back and forth. Then he went up and bent down over him again. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha called Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunammite woman." He called her, and she came, and Elisha said, "Pick up your son." So she came, fell at his feet, bowed to the ground, and she picked up her son and left. So when Elisha arrives, the child's still dead. It's still laying on his bed up in his room. He closes himself in with the dead child. This is something of a repeat miracle. Elijah does about almost the exact same thing in 1 Kings chapter 17 when he raises the son of the widow in the town of Zarephath. And so even the same method, laying on it and eye to eye, mouth to mouth, hand to hand. It kind of also makes me think of Jesus when he raised Jairus' daughter, the synagogue officials. He goes in and he puts everyone out and closes the door. There's only the parents and 3 disciples there with him. Everyone else is out. And so there's kind of that feel to it. The boy has been dead since the day before. His body was cold. And it took time for them to, travel back and forth. He's lifeless. What do you do in that situation? Well, Elisha prayed. He prayed. He asked God to do something here. Prayer is always a good choice. No matter what your situation, take it to the Lord. Elisha then repeats almost exactly what Elijah did, stretching himself out on the boy, mouth to mouth, eye to eye, hand to hand. Through the power of God working in Elisha, the boy is brought back to life. His body begins to be warm again. Elisha gets up and he paces back and forth through the house. And then he goes back to the room and he begins the process all over again. And finally, the boy sneezes 7 times and opens his eyes. God had raised the child back to life. Elisha then calls for the child's mother so she can receive her son. God had not broken his promise. His character is shown to be faithful, but he is sure to bless the woman in return for her faithfulness. Now, this is also a good moment for they lived happily ever after, but that isn't the end of their story. They actually get some more space here. Life has all of its blessings. Yes, there's blessings in life, in the world, but we need to understand they are all temporary. No matter what blessing you have, it's temporary. You will have ups and downs in life. You will have to take the good and the bad. So the question becomes, will you trust God with your tomorrow? When you hit that crisis moment, where do you run? Who do you depend on? See, the Shunammite woman ran to Elisha. She ran to God. She knew where to depend. And I think that makes all the difference in the story. Now, we're going to find that the Shunammite woman and her son's story continues in 2 Kings chapter 8. We actually jump ahead a couple chapters, and they pop up again in our story. Chapter 8, beginning in verse 1. Elisha said to the woman whose son had been restored to life, "Get ready, you and your household, and go live as a resident alien wherever you can. For the Lord has announced a 7-year famine, and it has already come to the land." So the woman got ready and did what the man of God said. She and her household lived as resident aliens in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. When the woman returned from the land of the Philistines at the end of 7 years, she went to appeal to the king for her house and field. The king had been speaking to Gehazi, the attendant of the man of God, saying, "Tell me all the great things Elisha has done." While he was telling the king how Elisha had restored the dead son to life, the woman whose son had been restored to life came to appeal to the king for her house and field. So Gehazi said, "My lord, the king, this is the woman, and this is the son Elisha restored to life." When the king asked the woman, she told him the story. So the king appointed a court official for her, saying, "Restore all that was hers, along with all the income from the field from the day she left the country until now." So Elisha, we find, warns this same Shunammite woman that a 7-year famine is coming on the land. Okay, a famine's coming. It's likely part of God's judgment, his discipline on Israel, because King Joram would not repent of his idolatry. We see King Joram was a wicked king. All of Israel's kings were wicked kings. If you go through the history of the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah had some good kings and some bad kings, but the northern kingdom never had a good king. But Joram was not repenting. He was not getting with the program, and so this famine is coming, and Elisha warns the woman to take her family and flee, go somewhere that you're going to have food for this period. Now you'll notice that the woman and her family listen to and follow Elisha's instructions. They trusted God with their future. When God said pack up and move, they went. Enough to abandon their home and abandon their ancestral land and abandon their farm. See, if God tells you to move, would you go? If he says, quit your job, pack up your apartment, get in your car and start driving. I want you to go somewhere. I'm not even telling you where. Just go. Would you listen? Do you trust him to know what's best for your future? Well, what we find is she did. And 7 years later, God sets up kind of a divine appointment. Because what are the chances? Here's Gehazi, at this point Elisha's former attendant, and he's visiting with the king, and the king wants to hear. I want to hear about the great things Elisha's done. They didn't have TV, okay? You had to tell stories. That was, their entertainment. And he wants to hear about the great miracles Elisha's performed. And just as Gehazi is telling the king about how Elisha raised the Shunammite woman's son back to life, that's when the Shunammite woman and her son walk in. It's a divine appointment. God has set this up. They were there after the 7-year famine has ended, and they came to ask for their property. And remember, property in Israel was assigned to each tribe by family. So you were supposed to have this property assigned to you based on your tribe, based on your descendancy. But who knows? During the 7 years she was gone, they could get squatters. Okay, this could be a dynamic. Now, the fact that she and her son are going to talk to the king would strongly suggest at this point, her husband, who was considered old back when the story started, has almost certainly passed away. Otherwise, he'd go talk to the king. Would have been his land. But now that her husband's passed away, it's her and her son who have to go talk to the king. This woman and her son have gone through the grief of losing her husband and his father. They have gone through the grief of having to abandon their home and their farm because of the famine, of having to leave their nation to go live in another country. And now they're returning home hoping to rebuild their lives. Just because you receive God's blessing, just because you are faithful and walking with the Lord, does not mean you'll never face hardships or difficulties. You know what? You can be the best person. You can be walking with the Lord. You can be walking with the Lord like Elijah. You may still have a hard day. Elijah did. This woman did. Sooner or later, we all face times of hardship and grief. Sooner or later, we all face circumstances of economic downturn. Money comes and money goes. You know, they say money talks, but all mine ever says is goodbye. It's just, you know. But sooner or later, we face the grief of the loss of a loved one, a spouse, a child, or a parent. It's part of living in a fallen world. We all face it. The question is not, will we face hardship? Will we face grief? Will we face difficulty? The question is, where will we turn when we face it? Will we trust God with our tomorrow, even when we are facing hardship and grief? The Shunammite woman did. She knew how to use her resources to support God's ministry in the world. She knew where to turn when things went wrong, and she knew how to honor and obey the Lord when He gave her instructions in life. And so now she's coming back. And we're going to see that her faithfulness becomes the gift that keeps on giving. It is because God gave her this divine appointment. Gehazi's just finished telling the king about her story. She walks in to ask for her property back. She was able to confirm the story to the king. Yes, this is what happened. Yes, this is my son that Elisha raised back to life. And in return, the king gives her back her property. Now, the kings of Israel were not necessarily known for justice and fairness, okay? But in this case, he is so impressed with what God's done in this person's life, so impressed by the miracle that Elisha had done, that she gets blessed once again. You see the circle. It starts with her blessing Elisha. And God blesses her with a son. God through Elisha raises her son back to life. But now she's getting her farm and her land back because all of that happened. It's because of her interaction with Elisha. The story started with a humble act of hospitality, offering Elisha dinner. And it grew into the blessing of them getting their farm back after 7 years of famine. God used their kindness, and He blessed it. Do you want God's blessing? Then seek Him. Seek the Lord. Put whatever He has given you to work in your life so that it honors Him. Support His work in the world. Be willing to give to others so God can give to you. He'll never outgive God. Most importantly, we need to approach life with an open hand. Remember that everything we're blessed with in this world is temporary. Everything is temporary. The only thing that is forever is our relationship with God. So we need to trust Him. We need to trust His eternal, unlimited power to provide for our temporary needs today and tomorrow. Now, this isn't easy. I've been there. I've been on both sides of this equation. I have been there where I have prayed and begged God for someone to live and had God tell me no. I've seen people pass, people that I wanted to live. I've been there where we had, in fact, I remember one gentleman, doctors said they didn't think he'd last the hour. We prayed and he lived. Now, he died a couple years later of an entirely different thing. See, because even when God raises these people from the dead, they're not eternally alive in this human body. We still have to face death. This woman, this young man, he grew up, he lived his life, he honored God, we would assume, but then he had to go on to his eternal home. You can have both ways. There will be times where God says no. There'll be times where God says no. And there'll be times where maybe God blesses you and says, yes, I'll give you some more time. I'll give you longer. Be grateful. Accept the blessings that God gives. Trust Him for tomorrow. And make sure to use it for His glory. Because sometimes you may have been blessed for a time and then lose the gift. Those earthly blessings are temporary. I think in my own life, one example, my mother was in the hospital. She was not doing well. And I prayed, Lord, I'm just not ready to lose my mother. And I really felt like God answered me, well, when will you be ready? Now, the answer is, I'll never be ready. There isn't going to be a time where I'm ready. I can't think of a single person that I've lost that I was ready for them to go. Now, God was gracious. My mother recovered, and she's still alive today. But we need to understand God's gifts do sometimes die. The things in our life are temporary. But when you face that moment in your grief, what you must do is turn to the Lord. Don't run away from Him. Turn to Him. Turn into it. Trust Him for your tomorrow. Trust Him that He will provide, that He will guide you through the dark, shadowy valley of death and lead you safely out the other side. Because He's the only one that can. That's what we need to do. We need to put our faith in Him for our tomorrow, both the tomorrows we have on this earth and also putting our faith in Christ for the tomorrow we have in eternity. That's what we must do. Thank you for watching this video. If you live in the greater Phoenix area, we would love to have you come and worship with us in person any Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. The Meadows Baptist Church is located at 3701 West Beardsley Road. That's the side road of the 101 just west of 35th Avenue. We would love to have you pop by as we celebrate Jesus together.